Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. As we wait for people to come and join the session, please feel free to share your name, your organization, and your affiliation with us in the chat box. Awesome. We're happy to have you. Hello, everyone. As you're all joining the session, please feel free to share your name, your affiliation, and where you're joining us from in the chat box. So we will get started shortly. We'll just see if a few more people are going to be joining us. And again, yeah, feel free to share your name, your organization, and where in the world you're joining us from in the chat box. Hi, happy to have you. All right. Just before we get started here, if anyone else would like to share your name, your pronouns, your organization, and where in the world you're joining us from, feel free to do so in the chat box. There should be an icon on the bottom of your screen that says chat, and you can do that there. Hi, Shalina. It's okay with me, but check with Mensure. It's okay with Mensure, so good to go. All right, well, I think we'll be getting started right away here. So again, last chance, okay. But you can still feel free to share your name, your pronouns, your organization, and where you're from in the chat box. So welcome, everyone. We're so happy to have you in our session. My name is Serafina, and I'm a project assistant at CFRAC. My colleague Mansouri and I are so happy to have you on our workshop on effective intercultural practice. We work at the Center of Race and Culture Together, and it's a nonprofit organization in Edmonton. We work with the community to advocate and support individual, social, and systemic change to address racism and discrimination and to increase intercultural understanding. Our expertise spans from workplace development to community building, as well as research and education. We usually have our workshops in person, but we've been using this online format since the start of the pandemic, and we're really grateful that you could join us here online today. So we just want to do our land acknowledgement to get started. So We're gathered here in Amiskwachi-Waskaikan, traditional Treaty 6 territory of the First Nations and Métis Nation of Alberta Zone 4. We respectfully acknowledge and thank the diverse Indigenous peoples whose ancestors' footsteps have marked this land for centuries, including the Cree, Nehio, Dene, Saulteaux, Nakota, Blackfoot, as well as the Métis and Inuit. This land is and has been a welcoming place for all peoples who come to Edmonton and call it home. It is a place built for community, trade, friendship, and shared understanding. We recognize those Indigenous peoples who are still fighting for equality today, and we support them in the spirit of decolonization and reconciliation. We remain committed to honoring the struggle of our Indigenous siblings and joining with them to end injustice. Together, we call upon all of our collected, honored traditions and ancestors to help us work together in the spirit of community and understanding today and ever onwards. So why do we do treaty acknowledgements? We are all treaty people. Long ago, when the first settlers came to this land, they drafted treaties that Indigenous people signed with goodwill and in good faith. Those settlers and settlers up until today have not always honored those treaties. The treaties were meant to honor the traditional land and the way of life of the Indigenous peoples, to ensure their rights and prosperity, and to build understanding and mutual cooperation. Today, we acknowledge the treaty land as a way to recommit to honoring the spirit of those treaties and to recognize the continued rights of Indigenous peoples as the traditional stewards of this land. We recognize that many Indigenous peoples have been dispossessed of their land and traditional ways of life, and along with that, the prosperity that came with it. We acknowledge the treaties to understand we all have a role to play as treaty people in reconciliation and in righting the historical wrongs that have taken place. We would also like to ask you to share your land acknowledgements based on the treaties you are residing in the chat box below. So next I'll introduce you to my coworker, Mansoure. So Mansoure Madares holds a PhD from the University of Alberta with a focus on community, intersectionality, and transnational feminisms and storytelling. She has been an educator, instructional designer, and a researcher for over a decade, and has worked in the post-secondary sector and adult education, as well as in the public sector and community engagement programs. She joined our team in January 2020 and is working as the senior consultant, overseeing our work and consulting services and developing our educational programs, such as gender inclusivity in the workplace, a practical guide, and challenging discrimination through community conversations. Mansoure is committed to raising awareness about social issues and fostering inclusive practices. So welcome to Mansoure, and we're so excited for her to lead this seminar today.
Thanks so much, Serafina. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us. So as you know, today we are going to talk about the online course that we will be offering in fall, Bridging the Intercultural Gap. And so here's a roadmap for us to know what to expect from this session. First, we'll take a look at the need for discourse in the community. What is the importance of that in our ever changing and evolving communities? We'll go over learning objectives. We will talk about who discourse is for and when and where it will be offered. We will also talk a little bit about the format of the course, so going over the content and of course the completion and certificate, as well as the way to register for this course. At the end, we'll hopefully have some time for Q&A. So for this purpose, whenever you have a question, feel free to use the chat box. Excuse me, and also use the Q&A button. There you can share your questions and everyone will be able to see that and upvote that as well. And then in the Q&A, we will go back to them and we will try to answer those questions. All right. So I would like to start with this sort of a definition that we have for cultural competence. And more or less, we all have a sense of culture and cultural competence. But this definition, taken from cultural competence guidelines and protocols from Carleton, the Ethical Communities Council of Victoria, is a really accessible one to make us see what this is and why it matters for us. So as you see here, and I quote, cultural competence requires more than practicing tolerance. People who are culturally competent will have a number of skills, including understanding one's own culture, being open to learning about other cultures, and communication skills for working interculturally. So in a way, instead of just simply complying with legislation or meeting minimum requirements or standards of practice or having a fixed endpoint, as this source suggests, cultural competence is a process which continually evolves. And of course, this idea of process matters because we always talk about this as a journey, since all the topics and discussions and ideas evolve, and we need to keep current with them. We need to look at our own cultural and intercultural practices and see where we can improve them in our community. So instead of having the mindset of checking boxes, right, at our organizations and our everyday interactions, we would want to develop a space in a way for community to be able to connect better to one another and learn and contribute in the same way. So at the core of this course, we are dealing with intercultural communication. So as you will see throughout the next slides, we'll be talking about many different aspects that sort of contribute and define intercultural communication. We'll touch upon ideas of bias, social location, culture, communication, and of course, the difference between multiculturalism and intercultural communications or practices. So as you can see here, we have the objectives for this course that we're sharing with you. So the first objective, and we will dig deeper a little bit more in the next slides, but the first one is explore culture, cultural norms, and the way our own cultural lens influences our work. The second one would be to understand cultural biases and the way they can lead to discrimination. Then we will try to increase our understanding of cultural humility in the context of social inclusion and equity. And the final objective would be to develop culturally informed practices to guide our work for effective intercultural practice. So let's take a look at each of these and see what we will expect from this course. So as the very first objective, we will try to see what culture is, in a way, and how we can define the cultural norms. What are those cultural norms? How do we view them? And the way our own cultural lens influences our work. This is very important because knowing about the definitions of culture, how it is defined, what basically is considered culture or cultural practice, we can have a better perspective of ourselves as well as others that we interact with in our works. The other one, the other one here would be to understand cultural biases and the way they can lead to discrimination. So in another module of our course, we will introduce biases. We'll try to understand what biases are the fact that everyone has them, and the idea that we will see different forms and examples of that in the world around us, so that in our practices, we will be more aware of their existence, and we are able to keep them in check when it comes to our actions and behaviors, whether it's in our personal lives or our professional lives. So this way, we will also ask you in each module to also do these individual reflections as well as the assignments that we'll be talking about, in order to make sure that we understand a concept and we're able to identify them and address them when we need to. The other goal would be to increase our understanding of cultural humility in the context of social inclusion and equity. So we would want to make sure that by knowing about our own cultural practices, our own social location, and the diversities within ourselves, we are able to connect to experiences of others and the other social locations that we see around us, and have a more efficient communication style in place when it comes to those interactions. And to develop culturally informed practices to guide our work for effective intercultural practice. So here, we will focus on the fact that Canada as a country has been known for being a multicultural society, multicultural community. So in this module, as the final one, we will look at what it means for a society to be multicultural, and what it means for society to be intercultural, and what is the path to move from multiculturalism to interculturalism, where we make sure that we're moving towards social justice, more equitable actions, and being able to interact with people in a more equitable way. All right, so who is this course for? And I'm sure that that is probably one of the questions that is on your mind today as you've joined us. So when we were designing this course, we were thinking of our audience as adult learners who will be joining us from very diverse backgrounds. So whether it's educational background, whether it's identity markers like age, ethnicity, ability, gender, we want to make sure that we're able to reach out to all community groups and members. One point which is important here, as a result of this goal, we do not require you to have any former training in these topics. As I suggested, we will be talking about these issues in different modules in this course. So there will be introductions, there will be activities and assignments, there will be meetings and discussions to make sure that these ideas are learned and that you would be able to practice them in your everyday life. So the modules that we have for this course are understanding bias, diversity and social location, culture and communication, and intercultural communication. So if you have some former knowledge, if you have, for example, participated in a workshop, or you have attended one of our sessions, for instance, you may have an idea of a lot of these topics, or perhaps you've been trained in these topics in a different environment. But here, the focus would be very much on the community and community practices. And so our idea is to reach the general public in the most accessible way possible. So as for the course format, We will have 10 hours of blended learning. So what it means is that even though the course content is mainly online, and you would be able to access them through the platform that we will introduce to you, there will be interactions between the instructors and the learners, and of course, between the learners themselves, since we are constantly looking for ways to learn from each other and from each other's experiences. So as I will go through the different components of this course, we'll see how this can happen. So at the beginning of each module, you will have an introduction. That introduction will guide you through what will happen in this course, what the specific objectives are, and what you will be expected after this. So for instance, just like the beginning of this course, we had a roadmap. So that introduction would act as a roadmap in a way. Then we will move to the main lesson of this module. So that lesson would be a recorded file that you would have access to. You can watch it, and it consists of the slides. So you would be able to take notes when necessary and so on. It would be a 15 to 20 minute long lesson. And after that, you would be presented with some specific resources, such as videos or audio files or podcasts, short readings that we think are suitable for learners in this unit, so that you would practice a lot of those definitions, a lot of those ideas, a lot of those examples that were there in that recorded session, the lesson for you. In each module, we have designed individual reflection times. So the reason for that is because we want to continuously make sure that you're able to understand these ideas, these notions in your own position, and be able to make sure that you can relate to them, you can understand them well. So the goal for these individual reflections is not to share those responses with us, even though you would have a chance to do so if you're willing to in the discussion forum that I will talk about in a minute. So throughout the lesson, we will also have very short quizzes for you, just like a lot of the online courses you may have experience of working with, that is checking your learning continuously, basically. So making sure that you are following up with the discussions, that things are going smoothly, or you are on the right track as a learner. But they don't really have a value in themselves saying that, oh, you failed this, or, you know, you earned something. The idea is for you to go back to that notion. If you got the answer, for example, the question wrong, and make sure that you learn that, you read that or hear that one more time. The other component of this course is the discussion forum. So the main reason behind adding this component is that we are dealing with an online platform, and even the times that we will be meeting or communicating, they will be virtual in this course. So having a discussion forum would be essential for this context in order for learners to be able to communicate to one another, to hear about each other's ideas or experiences, and also learn from them. So what we require the learners in each module is that after the lesson is done, they've done the readings, or they watch the videos, or listen to the podcasts, whatever that is designed as part of those modules, we will ask you one question, which would, in a way, challenge you in thinking about what you've learned in the context of your own personal or professional life. Right? So you can share to the extent that you're willing to, of course, but it helps you and us get a better sense of the learning process and making sure that everyone is benefiting from each other's experiences in different fields. And we also invite you to comment on each other's ideas in order to create a sort of a virtual discussion going on where we can pick up on them as we're meeting in our virtual meetings. Again, more about that in a minute. So the last sort of component of each module will be the assignment. In the assignment section, you will be presented with a scenario or a story or an example where you would try to answer a question regarding that. So in that scenario, for instance, if we're talking about bias, you will be provided a scenario where you can test your own skills that you've developed throughout this lesson and see if you can actually apply that knowledge to this context. So in these assignments, we usually ask you to type in a very short paragraph answering, again, the question or the pointing question for that scenario and submit that to us. So what is the difference between, let's say, the discussion forum and the assignment, as could be a question there, is that in the discussion forum, we have a more sort of a free-flowing conversation going on, right? There are no exact rules there. You are not going to be graded in a way. The important thing is you complete that task and you interact with your peers. However, when it comes to assignments, you can expect to get feedback from the instructors. So that once you submit your paragraphs, you will be asked some questions, you will be referred to perhaps some reading or some file that we had shared with you, and that way you can sort of interact with the instructors and make sure that you are on the right track. Now, throughout the session, we will have 3 virtual meetings. And those will be a chance for us to meet in person, of course, in an online format, to make sure that we are able to course correct, right, as we are moving toward the end of this course. So we'll have one session towards the beginning of the course, one after the first 2 weeks, the first 2 modules of the course, and one towards the end to make sure that everything is going well. So upon completion of these components and making sure that you have done all the 4 modules and expected assignments, you will be able to receive a certificate of completion. So then for the virtual meetings, we will of course make sure that those are times and dates that will work for most of you, so that at least you would be able to attend 2 out of the 3 virtual meetings. And that would be a very important part, because not only does it give us a chance to know each other better and interact with each other better, it is a chance for you to ask your questions, share your comments with each other, with the instructors, and at the same time, engage in some small group activities from time to time. We may bring some of those issues or discussions that we've had throughout the module, right? And we can continue working on them as we are meeting virtually. So the next item would be dates and times that the course will be offered. So we have two rounds basically of offering this course in fall. And the first one would be, it starts on the 29th of September and runs through the 27th of October. The second one would start on the 17th of November and would run through 15th of December. Now, at this moment, and we'll share a few more details regarding that, we are accepting registrations for the first one. So the one that starts on the 29th of September, and as we'll talk about this again later, the registration for this starts tomorrow. So the link is right now available. I will ask my colleagues to share that in the chat box, but then you can start registering before tomorrow. The space is very limited because this is a pilot course. We are offering it as a sort of a subsidized fee. So that we can welcome a lot of different community members in order to see if this works for them, if this is a good experience for them, and for us to be able to improve it in the next rounds. The times for the virtual meetings, we will be sharing with you a survey at the time of registration. So tomorrow, as the registration opens, you will be asked a few questions. There will be some demographic questions, and there will be some questions about whether you have any former training, and also about your expectations of this course. So yes, thank you. The link is shared in the chat box. You can take a look. Again, you cannot start getting tickets at this moment, but it will open tomorrow. So make sure that you register for the course if you think that this is the right fit for you, or if you would like to share it with a friend or colleague, make sure you do it as soon as possible, because based on our experience, once the registration opens, there will be a lot of requests for that. We will also have a wait list for that, but again, it would be much better if you're able to register for the course as soon as possible. And so in the survey that we will be sharing with you at the time of the registration, you will also tell us what would be the best time of the day for you for those virtual meetings, so that we can schedule them in the way that it would work for most people. So we will give you a few different dates and times to make sure that we are accommodating everyone's needs that way. So this is all I have to say at this point. So I would like to open the floor to Q&A. So again, you can share your questions in the Q&A button or in the chat box, and we will be happy to answer them. All right. In the meantime, I will ask my colleague to also share a poll, demographic poll that we have. It's an anonymous one, but it will help us make sure who our audiences are and who we're planning for to improve our services. So they will launch the polls for you. And yes, it's there. So please make sure you answer these questions. So we'll be here for maybe a couple minutes to give everyone a chance. And please feel free to ask your questions as well if you're done with the poll. If there's something that is in your mind but we did not cover, we'll be more than happy to talk about that. Thanks for your question, Patricia. So at this point, we have opened the registration for the first round for 25 individuals. And that's why the space is limited, because we want to make sure that we're actually accommodating the needs of the participants. We're able to interact with them in a timely manner. It may change in the second round, depending on our capacity, but for the very first pilot round, this is our vision. All right, just a reminder. First of all, thanks so much for attending the session and for joining us today. So one thing is that please feel free to share your comments and questions with us. There is a feedback form in regards to this that we will share the link with you in a minute in the chat box. Again, make sure you save the date. Registration opens on September 1st. If you would like to share with your colleagues and friends, please do so as soon as possible. You can find more information and of course the recording of this session, if I'm sure that a lot of people did not get a chance to attend the live session. So there will be a recording and it will be available on our website, so everyone can just go back to it and follow the points. And of course, feel free to share your thoughts, comments, questions with myself as well at consulting@cfrac.com. And as always, we're always looking forward to hearing from you. So if you have no more questions, I would just invite you to go ahead and fill out the feedback form that is available to you through the link that is shared in the chat box. All right, thanks everyone for your attendance, and we're looking forward to seeing you, of course, and hearing from you. Please stay in touch.